Okay, in this video, we're gonna talk about food pairing and food chaining. So let's talk about food pairing first. It's pretty simple. It's the practice of taking a familiar or safe food and pairing it with an unfamiliar food to increase the comfort and willingness to eat for your child. So how do I do this? Step numero uno, add in foods to their plate that are in the accepts or enjoys category, that are familiar or safe foods. Step dos, mix an enjoys food with a learning food. An example of this might be peas mixed into macaroni and cheese or crackers pre-dipped in hummus. What I want you to do here is simply pair a food your child is working on with a food your child easily accepts. When we're adding new foods or foods that the child is working on, you might need to start really small. For some kids, this looks like a spoonful of peas in the mac and cheese. For some, this looks like one pea in the mac and cheese. And for some with sensory concerns or a fear of new foods, or one who really struggles with new foods, this might look like one pea on a food pick next to their plate and slowly moving it closer each meal. You just have to evaluate where your child is at, meet them there, and slowly help them go up the ladder, basically. There's no one correct speed or volume to introduce new foods to children or try new pairing. It's important to meet the kid where they're at and just slowly work up from there. So some other examples of food pairing are serving ranch with a new and enjoys vegetable. If you're using a dip as like the bridge or the enjoys food, I really like pre-dipping because sometimes your kid might just like ignore the food unless it's pre-dipped. Serving crackers pre-dipped into a new type of hummus or guacamole or edamame dip. Serving a new salad with preferred shredded cheese and preferred croutons on top. Croutons. Serving a favorite pasta dish with some new veggies in a small portion on the pasta. So that's food pairing for you. Super easy and really short. Now, food chaining. I love this topic. It's a pretty popular tool used in feeding therapy. Probably more popular with certain therapists than others, but it's one of my favorite tools. Besides the super fun novelty stuff and sensory bins and messy play, I love using this with selective eaters. This one's gonna require you though to get out your homework from the video where we talked about the learning, accepts, and enjoys food. So we have a couple preparation steps we need to take before we're ready to begin food chaining. So step number one, think back to your food play and sensory bins. Think back to your safe food videos. For both videos, you were asked to talk about what foods your child is learning, accepts, and enjoys. So get out that list. Remember I said, if you do any homework for this course, that's the homework you need to write down. So get out that list. Keep in mind that these categories are going to shift and change over time. What was once in the enjoys category may move to the learning category and vice versa. It's normal to be in a constant state of flux with the foods your child enjoys and the food that your child doesn't. So don't worry if your child's food preferences change frequently. So step number two, take a look at each list. What are the common sensory factors between the food? Taste, texture, color, smell, temperature. These are the types of your child's preferred or not preferred foods. So for example, you might see that the foods on the enjoys list are all hot, brown or white, salty, crunchy, crispy. Or you might see that they're all sweet, juicy fruits, no color similarities, and all crunchy. You might also see that foods on the learning list are slimy or squishy, chunky mixed textures like cottage cheese, or bitter like kale. Now, so these are things you should be writing on your list, like at the bottom of the list. Write the similarities for each category, if there are any. So now you should have 3 lists of foods, and you should have identified the similarities between each. This gives you an idea of the aspects of food that your child feels confident with and the aspects of food that your child does not feel confident with. So step number 3, let's work on moving safe foods off of the learning list, or some foods, off of the learning list to the accepts and enjoy list. So step number 3, let's work on moving some foods off of the learning list to the accepts and enjoys list. The reason we've made these foods is to identify what aspects of food your child struggles with the most. When we're practicing food chaining, we're not going to modify these in conjunction with other aspects of food. We're going one modification at a time. You should already be working on introducing these aspects of food to your children through food play, food pairing, novelty, and variety techniques that we've already discussed. So this is kind of like, this video is at the end of the course because it's an advanced topic, I guess you could say. It's not the first thing that I would go to, but it's something that can be really useful, and I still think it's fascinating. So the idea with food chaining is to pick an accepts or enjoys food for the starting point, then identify a similar-ish food in the learning category that we can use as a goal food. Then you want to identify small changes and transitional foods that allow you to take a step-by-step approach towards the learning food that you want to move into the accepts or enjoys categories. So there's several important aspects of food chaining. So these are kind of like the rules or the parameters. And then I'm going to show you and talk through some examples for you. So that'll help hopefully kind of bring it all together. So first important thing to keep in mind, you only want to change one thing at a time, especially for our kids who are extra sensitive to change and all things sensory. 2, start with changing the aspect of food your child is the most comfortable with changes in, if possible. So like if they're okay with shape changing, they don't care, then start with that. So number 3, these foods should be introduced to the child when they're hungry. This is going to increase the likelihood that the food will be tried and consumed. Snack time is great for this. 4, these changes should be implemented for everyone at the table. Don't attempt to work on food chaining with one child while another child or parent sticks with the original comfort food. That's just going to result in a tantrum. 5, don't offer the original comfort food if a transitional food is rejected. Instead, try using some novelty techniques to help ease the introduction and stick with the idea of this is what's served. It's your choice whether to eat it or not, but I'm not going to get out other foods today. The division of responsibility. So food chaining is a multi-step process. You're going to stay at each step until your child is comfortable with that food, and then you're going to make a change. That might mean serving a food several times before moving on to the next step. That's okay. You just have to follow your child's lead. This can be a slow process or it can be fast, depending on your kid's comfort level. So this concept is best illustrated with examples. So let's work through some examples together. So I'm going to put up this right here. So let's say the learning or not preferred food is a banana, and the enjoyed or accepts or comfort food is tortilla chips. So what do they have in common? Color. They're both like whitish tan. So we don't really need to change this. Very different in texture, salty or soft versus crunchy. Very different in taste, sweet versus salty. Very different in shape, triangle and thin versus round and thick. So step 0, we're going to start with the food they love, tortilla chips. Then step number 1. Next day, maybe we'll introduce salted banana strip chips. You might even need to mix them into a bowl of tortilla chips. Step number 2, we're going to move to salted banana round chips. Okay, so we've not changed the shape, now we're changing the shape. So the first step that we changed is a little bit of the taste, but we've kept the saltiness there, we've kept the shape there, we've kept the color there, we've kept the texture there. So step number 3, unsalted banana round chips. Step number 4, banana slices. Step number 5, a whole banana. And there are a few ways that you can modify this transition. So between steps 0 and 1, you can provide a bowl of tortilla chips mixed with banana strip chips, like I talked about. You can use your novelty techniques here to make each step easier. So don't just like, when you get to the banana rounds, just serve them a bowl of banana rounds. Put a food pick in each of them. Give them tongs to eat with. Have them serve the banana rounds with the dinosaur and have them feed their dinosaur first. Like, this is why food chaining is a more advanced topic, because it's something that needs to be used in conjunction with all the other strategies that we have talked about. So it's not just something that you use alone. You can also use your food pairing techniques to make this step easier. For example, if peanut butter is an accepted food, you can provide peanut butter for your child to dip the banana chips and slices in, starting with the first step, the salted banana strip chips. So here's all the strategies kind of coming together. So let's do another example. So let's say your child's learning food is salmon. Okay, so and their accepted food or enjoys food is chicken nuggets. It's a pretty common one. So what do they have in common? Pretty much they're hot. That's it. They're different in texture, flaky versus solid, even a little bit crunchy with the chicken nuggets. They're different in taste, they're different in color. So step number 0, you're gonna start with their favorite store-bought brand of Dino chicken nuggets or whatever they love. Step number 1, we're gonna use a different store-bought brand of unshaped chicken nuggets. So we're just transitioning from one type of chicken nugget to another, getting them used to their favorite foods or their enjoyed foods being adjusted or modified a little bit. You can always use like ketchup here or tongs or food picks, or have them practice cutting or have them press the buttons on the oven to help with this transition. Then step number 2, homemade chicken nuggets. And you guessed it, having them help making them could be really helpful with this transition. Step number 3, homemade fish nuggets with white fish. Have them help make the fish nuggets, just like they did the chicken nuggets. And if your child is sensitive to smell, open all the windows when you're doing this, because the fish smell can be strong and difficult for some kids to manage. So step number 5, salmon with preferred carbohydrate, or you can even do like homemade salmon nuggets. It might be kind of challenging, but you can probably figure it out, or breaded salmon. And then, go from there. There are a few ways that you can modify this transition. Again, get your kid involved in cooking, like I said, is really important. Using spices and dips as a way to make the transition easier. Flavor masking with dips, like ketchup, can be particularly useful when transitioning from chicken to fish. Ensure you have good ventilation, especially if your kid is involved in cooking the fish, because smell can really play a big role in food acceptance. So, what do you think? Food chaining is amazing. It's an awesome tool to have in your arsenal. It really needs to be used in conjunction with all the other tools that we use, and it's not where I would start with, but it is something that it's great to have in your tool belt, and a lot of feeding therapists use it. I just think it's fascinating. So the extra nice thing about this tool is that the speed can be modified to your child's need. If change isn't a huge deal for your child, perhaps you only need 2 to 3 steps in between each food. If change is super difficult for your child, perhaps you need 10 steps in between each food. Both are okay. No comparison games here, just progress. And a quick tip before we move on to the homework, I find writing down the steps to be so helpful. Like I illustrated here, it just makes it easier to visualize where you're going on your path with the food chaining. And it really gives you some direction in the process. So you can also, if your child is older, show them, you can try showing them how you're gonna work towards it and ask them to help you identify the steps. They might be game for it. So homework for this module, identify 3 foods that would be most beneficial for your child or your family if your child started to enjoy them. Then, starting with your top priority, identify the best way to food chain to these foods. Try it out, modify what you need, and then start with the next one. Remember that each child can progress through food chaining very differently. And you're gonna need to start with your top priority and be patient. Some foods might be easy, some foods might be hard. Some kids will need few steps, some will need a lot. So be patient with yourself, be patient with your kids, and have persistence, because this will pay off. So that's the end of our food chaining video. Send me pictures on Instagram at growing.intuitive.eaters of your food chaining maps that you created, or your lists, or your food chaining transitions, and let me know how it goes.